Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. And today we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, and we're going to put it in context of really the main theme of really these podcasts, And the point of that is that I even remember when I was a little kid, I used to say, I was kind of a weird guy, I guess. I was kind of pensive. And I used to say, I want to understand what life is and what existence actually is before I go out and decide how I want to live it. It seemed like so many people, I used to say so many people are so busy with their jobs and so busy with this and so busy with that. And they don't even understand what it is, that they're working on, what they're living with. And that's seems to me to be step one, and it's pretty good for a little kid, But the idea then, and just a really quick review of, the underlying basis of existence, that one thing, some call it the field of no-thingness, pure isness, pure consciousness. Because why no-thingness? Because it's beyond things. It's beyond the relative, the existence of material objects. It's beyond that. So it's no-thingness. And so that underlying basis is that of pure consciousness, consciousness, nothing else existing. So it's consciousness by its nature. What does it become conscious of? Itself. Consciousness becomes aware of itself. It perceives it as other. Duality is born, keeps interacting. That consciousness becomes aware of the two things. The third thing is born, boom, 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 out to infinity. And then that whole self-interacting dynamic of that virtual structure really builds the Sri Yantra, all the different yantras, all the different geometric foundations of modern physics, of existence. And then it just cascades out into relativity. And within that relativity then, and this is the point that I think speaks to where we get confused, I think, around artificial intelligence, is that in relativity, in life, we become identified with some limited perspective, some limited understanding of the whole dynamic. And so we kind of lose sense of the whole. And so, what was it? Elon Musk was being interviewed by Tucker Carlson, and I didn't watch the whole thing, I don't think, but I saw most of it. It was a 2-part series, I guess. But one thing that really interested me, and we'll get into artificial intelligence through this, one thing that really interested me is that Elon was saying that he wasn't sure that he had a soul. He said, it feels like it. He said, I'd like to think I do, but I can't prove it. I don't know. And that said volumes to me because, see, we have that structure. And how does that structure work? Well, you've got that deeper level of no-thingness. And then as things manifest outward within our physiology, if we go deeper and deeper into our being, right, we ultimately transcend. We awaken to that field of pure isness. And it's a physiological thing. But the next subtler level is what's called the finest feeling level. It's that level deep inside. It's the level of then intuition. It's a feeling level. It interfaces directly with our gut instincts, our gut feelings. We feel it in our gut. It's an intuitive thing. And so from that level, then when we start to reason things, and reason is an interesting thing because it hasn't precipitated out into a concrete idea yet. It's still a feeling, but nevertheless, it's kind of the interface between pure gut feeling, that intuitive sense. And as I said in previous podcasts, Maharishi Patanjali, the word he uses for intuition, you could translate it literally into English as gut feeling. It's interesting. And through that, then as we reason, if the physiology is integrated, if it's functioning well, then it wells up into what is reasonable and into concrete then thoughts. And so feeling is at the basis of reasoning, is at the basis of our concrete thoughts. But now when I watched Elon Musk talking, one thing that really interested me was that the guy's in his head, and that's fine. I mean, I like Elon Musk, and I think he's great, and I enjoy all the stuff he's done. I have a lot of respect for him. But nevertheless, you can even, and you see this same thing with a lot of physicists or scientists or people that are in their head all the time, Do you notice that, Scotty? He becomes he's sort of neurotic,
Yeah, he's got like it's real heady. You can feel that he's always.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah,
kind of a tension or a lack of smoothness to the mode of his
right.
function,
Rigidity
Uh,
kind of too.
yeah, kind of a choppy rigidity kind of a
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. And I don't mean to be critical of him. I mean, but that's common, and that doesn't really matter to me so much, except for the fact that when somebody gets so caught up in the intellect, and we're trained to do that, the whole orientation of Western thought is all about the intellect. Hmm? And what that does is it creates an imbalance between the deeper level, that deeper place of true knowing, really, because you don't really know anything just through the intellect. Uh, you can justify anything with the intellect, and people do. I mean, look at the crazy stuff that's going on, and it's why? Because it's all up here in the intellect, and people lose touch with gut feeling. They lose touch with their own true nature. They lose touch with nature. They lose touch with natural law. And so the whole thing becomes unnatural. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to like to read the philosophers, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. And which philosopher was it about the evil deceiver? How do we know that all this isn't just a deception created by some evil being? I mean, you kind of get into this thing like with the Matrix, the movie. And the thing about those things, I remember saying I was around in India. Once he made the comment, he said, "Just too ridiculous." I thought that was great, because it is ridiculous. You can conjure up an infinite number of different intellectual notions that are logically consistent with themselves, but they're not based in gut instinct. They're not based in that place of true knowing. And there's a phrase that I really like that comes from the mathematicians use it. Intuitively obvious. When it comes right down to it, the principles of mathematics, well, they get their proofs and they try to create a structure with postulates and theorems and all that stuff where it's pure intellect. But really, the idea, even 2 + 2 = 4, that's intuitively obvious, and it's fine. They can create their rules and their postulates and their theorems and all that make it purely intellectual. But why the way they do that? Because they're building an intellectual construct around something that's in reality intuitively obvious. And so as we refine the physiology, as we refine our being, things become then intuitively obvious. We start living from that gut level feeling, that second mind, if you will, the deeper mind, that is really a field of intuition. And that is a gateway. Once you start getting onto that and that gets cultivated, it becomes the gateway to what? It becomes the gateway to unifying all levels of our being with that one thing that's the source of all things. And the unified field, Chaitanya, the Christ, what some people call that field of oneness, that interconnectedness. And so here's the thing. What happens when that whole physiological thing becomes purely unified, totally integrated? Then you're one with everything. And that's not a feeling. It's not an emotional state. You see, we can get emotional about fine feeling levels, but that's not what we're talking about. Emotion is energy in motion. Okay, but it can be stirred. Just because we have tremendous emotion about something doesn't mean it's truth. We're talking about something different than emotion here. And so if we get so caught up in our head that we ignore that, we're losing really the best part of our being, that place where we can know anything, we can know everything.
Michael, there's a question that came out about
Okay.
what's the difference between having a gut feeling and that something is true and pretending you know something you don't know or have no way of knowing.
Well, that's the difference. The difference is one, you're pretending, the other, you're knowing. Because how do you know anything? How do you know anything? Well, it has a lot to do with the level with which you identify. There was a fun quote, if I can find it here in my notes, that I put in the thing, in the blog. What was that guy's name? He said, everybody believes in something, you know. How did he put it? He put it nicely. You know where that is in the notes, Scotty, offhand? But you see, here it is. You don't have a choice as to whether or not you worship. That's nicely phrased. You only have a choice as to what you worship. See, in the world today, we don't really know. We can't really accept that it's a true knowing unless it's an intellectual derivation. And where's the intellectual derivation come from? It comes from the narrative, the belief system, the intellectual paradigm with which we're identified. But that's a superficial kind of knowing. Again, you can justify anything with the intellect. But the point is there's a different kind of knowing. And it's a gut feeling, not a gut feeling that comes from conditioning, from programming, from limitation of thought. We're talking about something different here. We're talking about a gut feeling that comes from an integration of the physiology with that transcendental level. And how do you know, to get back to the question in another way, how do you know that your gut feeling isn't tainted, isn't distorted, isn't based on some distortion, as opposed to a true knowing that comes from a physiology that's fully integrated and unified with that underlying basis of all existence? Well, that's the eternal question. That's a tough question.
Michael, is it safer just to assume that you're not there and to keep the exploration going until, like, there's so many things that point to that being either true or not true?
Yeah, or as has been said by Socrates, the only true knowing is knowing that you know nothing, which is really another way of saying what you just said, Scotty, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
You don't ever really know. The only true knowing is knowing no thing, knowing that level of no-thingness and coming from that place. And how do you know that you're coming from that place? Well, the only true knowing is knowing that you know nothing. So, see, even the state of enlightenment doesn't come with a USDA stamp. It doesn't all of a sudden cease to be a field of abstraction and become a field of concretion, you know? But we're addicted to the notion of concretion. We want concrete thoughts. We want facts that we can derive intellectually. And that it has a value. I mean, obviously, you know, I mean, Elon Musk is SpaceX and we're building all these incredible technologies and stuff. And that gets us to this arena of artificial intelligence. I mean, they call it artificial for a reason. Why is it artificial? Because it's based on a paradigm, a construct that's fed into it, as opposed to true intellect, if you will, with a capital I, which is integrated with the infinity, the infinite depth, the transcendental depth, the underlying basis of all existence. And that is something they'll never be able to program into a computer. Hmm? And really, I mean, that's something Elon Musk is missing, you know? And so, okay, you know, you've heard me talk about this for a few minutes, and how do I know, and what do you think, and all that? Well, that's the beauty. If for people that are willing and patient and open enough to study it and understand it, the Vedic cognitions, the Vedas, all the Vedic literature, the more you study that, Vedic mathematics, the more you study it, the more you read it, what happens, and this is really interesting actually, is that you get this piece of it, and oh, that's cool, and you get this piece of it, and oh, that's cool, and you get another piece, and then and this is a physiological thing, it's a thing that has to do with your awareness. What happens is at some point, all the pieces of the puzzle come together within your own consciousness. And that's not because of an intellectual derivation, though the intellect can be a path to assist that, but it becomes a state of physiology. You can awaken to the totality, not as a notion. We can create an intellectual notion of it in 5 minutes, you know, read any number of different spiritual books, and okay, now I get it. It's called the I get it syndrome, you see?
Yeah. I like always when you talk about having erring on the side of understanding something versus overstanding something. And then when you're out there, just be ready to tack, you know, and not you're going to have to take a shot at some point, right? And
yeah, you do your best, and then you make your best guess and move accordingly, and then adjust, you tack as needed, you know, like a sailboat tacking across the ocean, you know. But overstanding, where does that come from? That comes from an excessive dedication and preoccupation and commitment to a limited perspective. And if this limited perspective can derive it, if this intellectual construct can derive it, then it's true. And we call that overstanding. And we look at other people, we look at other situations, and we overstand everything. Understanding is a very different thing. And in that moment, you see, you get used to it, but in that moment of awakening, pure awakening, that field of pure consciousness, it comes upon gradually, but it's a phase transition. And when it really happens, it comes about gradually, but all of a sudden. And then it's like real understanding. All of this is just lightly etched on the face of being, on the face of Chaitanya, on the face of the unified field. This is all just lightly etched on his face. But the real understanding then is that which lies beyond what's etched on the face. It's that no-thingness that is the foundation of all this thingness. And that changes everything. But again, it's not something you derive intellectually. It's not something you just get into emotionally. It's a state of the physiology, and I'm not talking about blood chemistries. I'm talking about something much deeper, a physiology of awareness, you see. And really, that's what's missing, and that's what artificial intelligence will never derive. You know, when I was a little kid, I was in the 5th grade, and we had to write a short story. So I wrote this short story, and it was about these two guys, and it went from one episode to the next, and each time I slightly changed their name. One episode, it was these two guys, and they were, the crossbow was invented, and they were seeing all these people getting killed on the wars and stuff, and the crossbow is just this new technology that was going to wipe out the planet. This will surely be the end of the world. and then it flips to the next, and I forget if it was I think the gun, and same thing. This will surely be the end of the world, and then it went to nuclear warfare. This will surely be the end of the world, and now it's artificial intelligence. So this will surely be the end of the world. And I'm not buying it. I do not agree, though, with Elon Musk in the regard of like wanting to regulate artificial intelligence, because who are they going to regulate it for? The United States? China's not going to hold back just because the United States is regulating it. And so they're going to get it. And if it is a bad thing, which it can be, anything can be misused, crossbow, guns, nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence. What we do well to do then, if we're so well intended, is to pursue it even more fully, so we understand it more fully, so hopefully we can maintain its use in a healthy and benevolent way, as opposed to, they were programming, Scotty, you know more about this than I do, but they're programming into artificial intelligence now how to lie and how to coerce people. They kind of get into how people's heads work. And then from there, the artificial intelligent process figures out just how to say things so that they can coerce and convince people of anything or of many things. And that's really if you want to get back into the whole thing that we talked about in the past and now it's become obvious, it's even in the news all over the place now, that the Chinese, and then prior to that, really the Russians back in the 50s, it started with the KGB. They're trying to infiltrate, and they're trying to take the foundation of life away from us, which is stability, and it undermines stability. Why? Largely by floating they use drugs and different things too, but largely by infiltrating the country with polarizing narratives. And so really artificial intelligence would take that to a whole new level, is the
Michael,
concern, one of the concerns. Yeah.
What I still fall back to the whole thing that we need to be responsible, 100% responsible as human beings to the population. That's why we need programs like yours, which are raising the consciousness of people. You know what I mean? And
it all comes back to that.
Yeah, because
right.
In the end, it's like, I always, commercials drive some people that I know crazy. And I'm like, how many times have you watched a Bud Light commercial and then wanted to run out and buy Bud Light? And I said, the reason why that doesn't happen to you is that your consciousness is in a place where, that may affect a certain person. That's why they're spending millions of dollars on that. That's not you, because your level of consciousness doesn't include
different.
That. You know what I mean? It's different.
Yeah.
But all of us.
It all comes.
Yeah.
It all comes back to cleaning the fishbowl.
Yeah.
Our relationship with artificial intelligence will be healthy and wonderful if throughout the world, if we clean the fishbowl of consciousness. That's not going to happen right away.
No.
It's a process, and we're working on it. The technology is there. The ancient rishis have offered it. We just got to build it. But in the short run, it's going to be abused like everything else. My God,
Well, more and more, Michael, it's looking like it's been abused because, those bots and everything else that are. We're talking about influencing elections. Everybody's worried about doing it, but there's artificial intelligence that's sending out messages to people to sway them one way or another. This group is doing this. That group is doing that. They're bad. This is this. We'll send it to all these people. They're doing that. That's what you're talking about.
And they're not going to stop. And if we regulate artificial intelligence in this country, it's not going. All it's going to do is open the gates wider for those people, because we won't have the technological knowledge to halt it.
Well, and it's like
you're better at artificial intelligence, and we have to do it fast.
Well, the Chinese you're talking about too, how they're influencing, like with the TikTok thing. Like the TikTok feeds here in the United States that they use, their algorithms are putting just nonsense, whereas like the algorithms for the kids in China, they're doing things that are like, you know, considered like educational or things like that versus being just like somebody, bouncing a, ball off their head, 100,000 times or whatever it is, something trivial,
It, and it's just become it's almost become a game where it's like the more they can break down the integration between the grassroots, the intuitively obvious, the depth of our being, what some people say, some people say, well, the only solution is God. What are they really talking about? I mean, that's fine. They put it that way. And I agree with it on one level, but there's a deeper understanding of it, and that's really what we're talking about now. And this subversive undermining of a culture has to do with breaking down that integration. And they've done it in so many ways, consciously and unconsciously. Now they're talking about eating bugs. What can be more of a intuitively obvious aversion than eating bugs? And what do they say? Oh, you're just not being rational. There's a lot of protein, blah, 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 like that. And they did the same thing with masks. They're doing the same thing with the border. Now, some woman I saw, and I think she was in front of Congress, I'm not sure, but she was upset and testifying because they have all crash dummies are male. Did you see that, Scotty?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she wants female crash dummies.
Right.
I mean, I don't care, but it doesn't make any difference. And I already talked about the philosophers and how they're so many of the philosophical thoughts are really just a result of complete dissociation of the deeper inner gut feeling, intuitive level with the surface of life, the intellectual dancing on the head of a pin is how they say it, I think, and then they get so indoctrinated in it. It's kind of like, don't bother me with the facts. I've already made up my mind, I mean, come on, world. You know what I mean? That's basically what I want to say. And you can look over my notes. I probably left out some things here and there, but it's in the notes. And from what we've said here, if you go back and look at the notes, I think the notes make perfect sense. At least I like to think so. Self-esteem becomes very superficial when we think so highly of ourselves because we have an intellectual paradigm we can follow and we can cling to. And what do they call that? A moral superiority, that sort of a notion. That's false self-esteem. It's not based on the self, all right. This is crucial. Humanity needs to understand this. The grassroots, in their own way, in their own language, has understood it all along. It's common sense, is what they say, and they're right. But I think that the deeper we get clear on this whole dynamic, the better off we are, and that's what we're trying to do here today. Time cycles. Everything goes from no-thingness to obsession with thingness, intellectual notions, and then back to no-thingness. That's the rise and fall of all civilizations throughout time. And that it's a cyclical process. And in a Maha biggest level, the cyclical process of from no-thingness to thingness and back has to do with the different yugas and the pulsations that we go from one yuga to the next. And what happens is that there's a moment in transition from one age, one mentality to the next. And we're right on the brink of it right now. And I've talked about this. It's like a sawtooth curve. Things are going. And all of a sudden it gets so crazy that boom, it just jumps up to a more sane era. And right now things are so crazy. So we're fortunate to be here right now because we are fortunate that we are seeing just how nuts things can get. And then to be able to witness that sawtooth jump when all of a sudden sanity regains its position, and things are going to get better. Things are going to get great. This is just a brief moment of that phase transitional period of time when things are just nuts, you know? So unless there's anything else, Scotty, I think that's all we have to say for this week. I want to add, I'm thinking about doing some things. Scotty and I were talking about this to make like little smaller sound bites that we could put together. And we're thinking about different ways of doing that. Because I know personally, I prefer little sound bites myself, something I can listen to for a minute even, and then go on to the next, and then another minute later. So maybe something like that's coming down the line. All right. Thanks everybody for listening, and we will talk to you again next time.